Geomags got an update this season which sounds like it could be extremely strong. New to the exotic, collecting an Ionic Trace grants increased super energy for Chaos Reach. This ends up being 2% energy per Ionic Trace you collect, which sounds pretty mid, but you can easily generate a ton of Ionic Traces. So I wanted to see just how good Geomags were now, and if they ended up being worth using over things like Fallen Sunstar or Vesper of Radius. I tested the super regen of Geomags over in Chi. I know there are a ton of ads compared to most places currently in the game, but I wanted a decent area to test how fast a super could be generated. And we do also have weapons like Cold Heart and Delicate Tomb, which also spawn extra Ionic Traces, which can affect things. Testing side by side with Cold Heart and Delicate Tomb, the super regen was actually extremely good. Cold Heart seemed to give our super back in around 40 seconds, and Delicate Tomb in around 50 seconds. Keep in mind, this was also non-optimized because it was regen purely from the Ionic Traces that these weapons were creating, and not things like our abilities Ionic Traces or even Orbs of Power. Then when using our abilities, Cold Heart was much faster, giving our full super in just 32 seconds, and then Delicate Tomb in just 31 seconds. I did also do a test with Ikelos SMG, which only had Volt Shot, and testing with this and our abilities, we still managed to get a 40-second super, which is just behind the exotics, and it also doesn't completely limit our loadout to a specific exotic and special weapon. Lastly, Vesper of Radius, just for reference, was also around a 40-second super regen time. This was with double dynamo, but also keep in mind Vesper is going to be much better in situations where enemies are tankier and you can maintain a more constant regen rate for your class ability. Whereas in Chi, I'd place my class ability down, it would kill everything nearby. Then I needed to wait for things to respawn to get that regen to start proccing. I think it's pretty clear to see that at the very least, the Ionic Trace regen when using Geomags holds its own. It competes with some of the best arc super regen options in the game. It has varying weapon setups that can prove more or less optimal depending on the setting you bring it into, and this is also just as effective when using an arc primary weapon. Not to mention, our ability spam cycle doesn't really suffer since we still have an abundance of Ionic Traces to make up for this. I wanted to go over the most optimal setup that you guys can use when generating your super and just any general piece of content. So the rest of this video will be covering that build. As always, if you guys do enjoy the video, make sure to drop a quick like and sub down below. We are super close to 80,000 subs. Within the actual Stormcaller subclass, obviously we're on Chaos Reach. If you did want, with Geomags, you should still be able to get the increased regen through Ionic Traces with Storm Trance. Obviously, you're just not getting the extended duration as well. As far as your other three main abilities go, Healing Rift is great. Arc tends not to have the best healing options. It has good damage resistance, but not healing options, so Healing Rift is great for that reason. I also prefer Ball Lightning. It works at various ranges. You can put this on your feet if enemies are up close, or send this out and deal damage over time with that. It's super easy to use as well. And then after that, I've always preferred Pulse Grenades ever since Storms got a pretty heavy nerf back with like Season 18 or Season 19. So Pulse Grenades are easy to use and super effective. For our first aspect, Electrostatic Mind is crucial to the build. With this, killing a blinded or even a jolted target is going to generate an Ionic Trace. And on top of this, any kills we get with our abilities also generate Ionic Traces, and those Ionic Traces make us amplified. So this really pairs well with giving ability energy back, and then obviously pairing with Geomags, so we get increased super energy gains as well. Arc Souls then pair perfectly with this as our second aspect. Whenever we place down our Rift, we get these to shoot at enemies for 15 seconds. This also counts as an ability, so any kill that this gets whenever we're off cooldown for Electrostatic Mind will be able to generate more Ionic Traces, and then while amplified through the Ionic Traces that we're picking up, these are going to shoot faster as well. When it comes to our fragments, first up is Spark of Discharge. This allows arc weapon final blows to create Ionic Traces. It says in the description that it's a chance, but it works on a percentage counter system where we need to reach 100% to get that Ionic Trace to generate. Red bars count as 33%, so 3 red bars will spawn this. Orange bars, aka majors, are 67%, so we could do a red bar and then a major, and that would spawn an Ionic Trace. And then good old bosses and mini bosses and elites, champions, things like that are going to be a 100% chance to guarantee an Ionic Trace. Spark of Magnitude is pretty good for this build as well. We're using Pulse Grenades. This takes it from 6 pulses up to 8. That's a 33% increase in its damage. And then with that, we also have Spark of Shock, so this also jolts. So not only are we using a grenade final blow to create an Ionic Trace through Electrostatic Mind, but then it also jolts enemies, so that should be another Ionic Trace as well. Then finally, with Spark of Ions, anytime we defeat a jolted target, this also can create an Ionic Trace. This incurs on a 6-second cooldown, so when this and Electrostatic Mind are both off of cooldown, you're going to see that 2 Ionic Traces are made anytime you defeat a jolted target. And then when this is on cooldown, Electrostatic Mind, I believe, has a much shorter cooldown, so you'll start seeing 1 for every jolted kill until this comes back. So this is just a free Ionic Trace every 6 seconds. All the mods are on screen right now if you guys want to click and apply them yourself, or as always, there will be a dim link down below, which you can click once and apply everything to your character in game. Looking at our helmet first, you're going to see that we have Dynamo, so that anytime we place our Rift near enemies, we get super energy again. We have Ashes to Assets, so Grenade Final Blows on enemies also give increased super energy gains. And then Harmonic Siphon, so that anytime that we're using an arc weapon, in this case, we're getting Orbs of Power to be generated, so we can pick those up, work those into the build, but more importantly, get more super energy through those orbs on top of everything else. On my gauntlets, I'm running Firepower for Orbs of Power on Grenade Final Blows. When running Iklo's SMG, I tend to use Harmonic Loader. Otherwise, I would run Grenade Kickstart because most other arc weapons have pretty good reload speeds. And then I do have Fastball on just for the quality of life improvement. On my chest piece, I have 3 copies of Damage Resistance Source mods. Make sure you're running this for end game content depending on the damage you're taking. Most of these other mods are pretty trash, and things like Kinetic Reserves or any other type of reserves that are useful, you just put on a chest piece, rally, swap, and then you're good to go. On my boots, these are obviously Geomag Stabilizers, so make sure you're running this exotic. I do have Innervation for increased grenade energy gains when picking up Orb of Power. I have Recuperation, so that Orbs of Power we collect also gives 70 HP back. We're making a ton of orbs, so on top of our Healing Rift, this is another healing source that we're getting with the build. And then since we are getting a ton of Ionic Traces, I am actually using Elemental Charge in this build, so collecting these has a chance to give us an Armor Charge stack. And realistically, with how many we're collecting each and every second, our Armor Charge stacks just go up super quickly. And the main reason for this is using something like Grenade Kickstart if you're not using a loader mod, so that you can get more grenade energy back through those Armor Charge stacks. Lastly, on my bond, I do have Bomber and then Outreach. These both give, I believe, 20% of our grenade and then our melee back respectively whenever we place our Rift down. You could easily swap like Outreach for a special finisher if you needed special ammo for you and your teammates. And then as always, I tend to run Powerful Attraction. This is a super strong mod. Anytime we place our Rift down or any class ability in general, we're collecting all Orbs of Power nearby and feeding them straight into our current system with builds, and we're getting all the effects of mods like Innervation, Recuperation, getting Armor Charge stacks, and things like that. Overall, Geomags definitely seem more viable now, but I still think these could get another buff and they still wouldn't be too overtuned. Something like increased super energy back when you cancel the super, or even getting an intrinsic damage increase whenever amplified, or something like that. Right now, they seem like another solid general use type exotic, but I always think exotics that are very specific at doing 1 or 2 things really well end up being meta compared to just generally solid options. Before I end the video, I do also stream almost every night over on my Twitch. A link to that is in the description down below if you guys do want to stop by and hang out over there. As always, have a good one, guys. Peace.